Right, so Mr. Greaves, welcome to our first ever podcast.
Yes.
First of all, thanks for agreeing to do this.
Yes.
So the podcast, it's going to be all about you, your life, history, your work. So let's start at the beginning. Tell us a bit about your childhood, where you grew up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I grew up on a council estate in Sheffield.
Mm-hmm.
It was supposedly the new future of council estates at the time, called Greaves Valley, and it was a massive estate with 3 schools on it. And we moved there when I was 5, and we moved into a 2nd-storey masonette, which had got 2 bedrooms and a lounge and a kitchen, obviously, and that was where we lived. And we lived there till I was 15, and out of the blue, without any discussion at all, my parents said we're moving house. So in those days, kids had no say in that whatsoever, where in today's environment there'd be a negotiation with 5-year-olds.
Definitely,
and if they didn't want to move, the parents wouldn't move, or if they did, they move on the next street. We actually moved to an area called Jordanthorpe, another council estate, but they were brand new houses, and the excitement was we got 2 toilets, and none of them were outside toilets, and I had 3 brothers, my father and mother, so there were 6 of us in the house, and 2 toilets was an advantage, until my middle brother ever used the downstairs one, and that was one where you probably avoid exiting through that door from time to time. So I was 15 when I moved there. There was no bus route to school. It was all mud, really. The housing estate was being developed, and I asked my parents how I'd get to school, and they said, well, you've only got another year to go, so what's wrong with walking? Which was great in the summer, but not particularly brilliant in the winter.
I can imagine, yeah.
And the teachers felt so sorry for me that the deputy head teacher used to give me a lift home from time to time, which was great. I was very sporty at school. I was in the school football team, cricket team, tennis, athletics, the whole of it really. And when I reflect back, I loved my school days. They were fantastic, to be honest.
Yeah.
Very sporty. I love sport, and I was good at quite a lot of it, if I dare say those words.
Good. So just touching on school, growing up
Sorry.
in school.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I thought you said scrote.
No.
I don't know why I thought that. No. That's to come.
Touching back on school, growing through your later years.
Yeah.
Where did you see yourself in terms of a career path? Where did you see that going?
Well, I was, like most kids, very unsure. Mr. Morgan was our careers teacher. I would be classed at school as quite challenging from what the teachers told me parents, because I used to question teachers' authority from time to time. And Mr. Morgan, in his wisdom, thought I'd be a good bin man.
Right.
So that was really, my career path was pointed out to me by Mr. Morgan.
Right.
Obviously I ignored that, and my father was very keen on me being an apprentice somewhere, and I got into engineering. Engineering's got a very broad description of engineering, but engineering for me was working in a factory where I'd learned to be a centre lathe turner. I'd learned milling, shaping, grinding, the whole engineering aspects, if you like, and that's what I did from being 16. And I was lucky enough that I worked for a private company, very established company in Sheffield. They got about 70 staff. I can remember even now the names of at least 65 of them.
Really?
And a lot of them obviously are long gone now. But it was a great experience for me. I loved it. I loved going to work. I worked really hard. And I was very keen on making money and bonus and overtime, and did city and guilds, and then all of a sudden we got a new general manager who transformed my life really for me.
Okay.
So he took me off the shop floor. He must have seen something in me. I don't really know what. I actually thought he got me in to get rid of me. But he actually got me into, if they wanted to start a planning and progress department. And because he felt I'd got good communication skills, took me into the office. I was so nervous that he was trying to get rid of me. I don't know why. That I got my father to meet him, to just give me and him reassurance that it wasn't some plot. I don't know why I thought like that, but I did. And the company worked on the basis of whichever customer shouted loudest got their products before someone else.
Right.
So what they wanted to do was to actually meticulously plan ahead. So planning and progress is to do with forward planning. So you get your orders, you work out the hours on different machines that need to be attributed to that deal, if you like, or that order, and you have to plan ahead, and you can see where your hotspots are. You can see which departments are going to be really busy and overstretched, and you can see other departments that really are going to struggle for work, where you might want to divert something in that direction. It was quite a change for me because I grew up at that company as an apprentice.
Yep.
And for me then to have a degree of authority over people who I was making tea for at one time, or fetching coal for the fire, etc., was quite a remarkable change.
Mm-hmm.
I eventually became the production manager of this company at 22, but never felt that I was earning what I was perhaps entitled to. So I job hunted and moved on to a company in the same sort of industry but much larger. They employed about 500 people, and I went there as assistant works manager. Sorry, I'll rephrase that. Assistant production manager, and I worked there really till I was 26, or just nearly 26. There was a sales vacancy at that time. This company was really established. They were established in 1812, something like that. It's a massive, massive firm at the time. Very well known in hand tools, and they made motor components, clutches and things like that. And there was a vacancy in the sales department, and I applied for the job in sales and was took into the general manager's office, a guy called Robinson, who was a bit like a sergeant major, and he told me quite categorically that you'll never be a salesman while ever you've got an hole in your arse.
Right, okay.
So that was my determination to prove
the fuel that you needed, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think I got the determination anyway. I mean, even as a 14-year-old, I'd got 3 businesses going. So I'd got a car washing service.
Right.
Typical at that time, I was a paper boy, car washing service, and I also bought a guy who was moving out of the area, bought his window cleaning round off him when I was 14. And in those days, I was earning about 50% of what my father was earning.
Wow.
To the point where my mum used to raid me.
I bet, yeah.
My little safe that I had with, she had a key for it, of course. And so anyway, I'll go on. I'm going back now rather than forward. So the vacancy cropped up at a company in Rotherham called Barlow Handling for a sales trainee. And I applied for the job. I was, like I said, 25, nearly 26. And went for the interview at Barlow. They were looking to recruit 3 sales trainees, 2 in Yorkshire and 1 in the northeast near Newcastle. And I'm delighted to say that following a really in-depth interview with a guy who I will always have a soft spot for, a guy called Tony Turner. And Tony gave me the opportunity to get into sales. At my interview, obviously the questions they ask you are things like, why do you want to get into sales? And rather than say I wanted to meet people, I couldn't wait to meet people, etc., which I think is box standard what people would say in that situation, I said, to be honest with you, I really want a company car. And I've done some homework on it, and I've worked on the basis that if you're successful, you'll keep your car.
Yep.
And if you're not successful, you'll lose your car and you won't have a job anymore. And that, I think, was the trigger point. His face lit up when I said those words.
Just out of interest, what was your first company car that you got?
It was a Morris Marina,
right,
UMY 92S.
So you can remember it.
UMY 92S, and the front passenger seat, the front passenger footwell leaked every time it rained. But it was a nice car because it was my first company car.
Yeah.
UMY 92S.
Good stuff. So you touched when you started there. How did it progress in your first year? How did it turn out for you?
Very good, that, because there was a little bit of heartache at the time. What they did basically was coupled you with a senior, like a field sales manager. Mine was a guy called Brian, who was a really nice fella, but Brian was just interested in Brian.
Okay.
So what the idea was is that they would give you a book. They'd invested in some books that actually mapped all the streets in an industrial area and all the companies on that street, which was great, really. So you could actually follow, once you got to a location, you'd look for the streets, and you'd know, even if you saw only 2 companies there, if your book said there was 4 companies, you found the other 2.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was that you went knocking on doors, finding out basically who was in the market. And I was quite good at that. You do tend to hang on to every word that customers say in those infancy days. So you tend to, if someone needed new forks and his tyres had worn out, in your head he needed a new truck. So you tended to be a bit over enthusiastic, or I did, and everybody did at that time. And they followed up on genuine inquiries. There was a lot of paperwork, daily reports to do, inquiry forms to fill in. The thing that Brian never helped me with was move on from being a door knocker.
Mm-hmm.
So when our regional sales manager, who was a massive influence on my mindset, that's always took me forward in my sales career, he got me in with my field sales manager, who was Tony, and started asking me some technical questions. And one of the questions, I'll never forget it, he said, what is an SS25? And at that time we marketed a French reach truck brand called Saxby, which only people who worked at Barlow's seem to have ever heard of. And I said, well, I'm not sure what it is, but I know it's a Saxby. Well, an SS25 was actually a brand of side shift.
Right.
So that told him that I'd learnt nothing in his head. And he actually said to me, this was after about 2 months working there, or 3 months, right, you've got a month to learn every single engine on every high support truck up to 7-ton capacity, whether it's gas or diesel. And I want the model of the truck, and I want every engine. And if you're not able to produce that information for me, we'll be letting you go.
Wow.
And I sat in my car and I started crying. In fact, I feel like crying now. I was absolutely devastated. I just couldn't believe that they'd expect me to. And I said to him at the time, I said, I've never been taught any of. I've never even been told that I got to learn this. You know, I've had no support or tuition whatsoever. It was just, this is Mansfield, cold call it. You know, this is South Sheffield, cold call it. And so anyway, I took my condensed guide home with me and learned every single engine on every Heister fork truck, and that was on the Challenger range and the Space Saver range, right up to 7-ton capacity, gas and diesel. So after that, they moved me away from Brian and moved me with a guy called Bob Hodder. Bob was it'd been promoted on the back of a big order he got over in Hull, and a really big order it was, 40 odd trucks, something like that. And they put me with Bob Hodder. Well, Bob was completely different than Brian. He was very streetwise, almost borderline market trader sort of mindset.
Really?
In hindsight, Bob was a bit lazy. Well, a lot lazy really, and but it was very, very helpful in terms of giving me tuition. What I had to do in those days, I'd just moved house. I took a 33% pay cut to go into sales, because moving away from the engineering company I worked for, I took a 33% drop in salary, but I got a company car.
Yep.
That was, one of my goals was to get a company car. A fully expensed company car, and there was no company car tax in those days like there is now. And to be honest with you, I couldn't afford a phone at home. There was no mobile phones in those days. In fact, there weren't even bleepers in those days. So I used to have to go to a phone booth and ring my field sales manager, who was Bob Hodder, every night. And I was so embarrassed that I've not got a house phone. I used to put, in those days, 2 shillings in the phone when the phone call was only 5p.
Right.
Or 6pence. So 2 shilling would be 10p in money now. But I put it in so it wouldn't hear the bleepers going, it wouldn't hear the bleeps going. So I didn't want anybody to know that I'd not got a phone. So after about 6 months or 9 months with Bob, they called me into the office because I'd actually got 2 or 3 sales that I'd instigated myself. The first truck I ever sold,
Yep.
I was cold calling in the first forklift truck of any description I ever sold was at a company in Immingham. I cold called it. It was called the Dunnage Supply Company.
Right.
Barlow did a truck called the Barmek Ranger, and the headline was "Ranger on the Land," and it's quite amazing. And they were after a truck. It was ideal rough terrain. Bob Stevenson, who all these people are long gone now, except for Tony, of course. And Bob Stevenson was on holiday, and I took it to the point of sale and got the commission for it, which I was really pleased about. My next sale was a powered pallet truck over at Mablethorpe at a printing company. This is where you had to get the pickup from work, put a powered pallet truck on it, drive there, demonstrate it, come back, and that was a sale. And but the first heist that I ever sold was over at Milnesbridge, which was at, from memory, I think it was called the Brooklyn Spinning Mill, or rings a bell, and that was a full spec heister with a bale clamp. So from there, I was asked to start selling used equipment. So Barlow at that time were going through a reorganisation, as they seem to do every 5 years or whatever. And our boss, who the guy I've got an awful lot of respect for, had got a theory of employing graduates. Well, I wasn't a graduate, but he employed people with the title doctor. And those people, I went out with a couple of them. One was Scottish, one was from Yorkshire. The guy from Yorkshire was a complete dreamer. The Scottish guy was a little bit of a political animal. And at that time, they were going through redundancies. They were taking a tier of salesmen out of the system. And one of the doctors said to me, are you fearing for your job as you were last one in? And I've never even thought of it like that, because I never even thought my job would be under threat, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
But his was. So he went, and the other doctor got moved on to something even more outrageously complicated that he couldn't sell. And I got on to use equipment, and I was quite successful at it. So in the first, don't forget you had to find your own lead. You didn't get any leads. So I had to cold call Bradford, West Yorkshire, etc. And I think I sold about 12 in about a 6-month period. And then I got called into the office to see our main boss, and he said that they were offering me a position of a Heister territory salesman. Because of the way Heister was sold to you as an employee, and that you'd witnessed it yourself, you actually felt like a god.
Right.
You actually felt like you were
untouchable.
You just felt just amazing. I walked out of there, felt 10 foot tall, that I got a Heister territory. The fact that I got probably the arsehole of the entire Yorkshire region to cover was irrelevant to me. So
what area did they give you then?
Well, they gave me initially Bradford, which was quite a buoyant textile market at that time. Bradford, Keighley, Halifax, and Settle, going up towards Settle. Ripon, for some reason that got tagged on, but not Harrogate and Knaresborough, and I don't know if I've just said Halifax, but Halifax. So they were the thing about Heister was it was the cream of the industry, especially on the IC product. It was just amazing. The build quality was just incredible, but in the textile environment that I was operating in particular, the Japanese had just started importing trucks. So Komatsu, Toyota, Mitsubishi, not perhaps there so much, but certainly Komatsu and Toyota were very, very strong. Toyota in particular, and they were about £3,000 a truck cheaper. So if you said in those days a truck, a 2.5 ton counterbalance IC product would be about 12 grandish, they were in at like 9.5. So you had to have a mindset to compete against that. One of my things that I picked up on was that the textile market itself was under threat from imports, and some of the directors of some of the textile companies were all part of the British Wool Federation, and they had buy British wool and don't export your jobs stickers in the backs of their Mercedes, backs of their Daimlers and Jaguars. And that was part of, my talk was really about how would you be able to look yourself in the mirror as a member of the British Wool Federation.
Yeah.
And then buy Japanese fork trucks.
So was the Heister manufactured in Britain?
It was manufactured at Irvine in Scotland, yeah.
Right.
Hand built in those days, Foster bronze bushes, it was just amazing. The Challenger truck was without doubt the number one fork truck in the world, honestly. And I got the opportunity of selling the best fork truck in the world, but I was selling in a marketplace that was forever, ever looking at price. We then had the opportunity to start selling rental business. So at one time I had a rental manager. So if you happened to get a rental deal, you had to go to your rental manager. You had to discuss the deal with him. Then you spoke to the branch manager or the service manager about the maintenance, and the whole thing got coupled up together, and eventually you got a rate. And in the end, we had a scheme called Think Rentals. I was very proud when I got my free Barlow Handling Think Rentals calculator. Yeah, but in those days, these were big things.
Yeah,
you got imagine. A calculator for free. I mean, I knew people who'd never had a calculator, never seen one. We got one for nothing. And you could work your own deals out. Now, Barlow had a formula that was, I don't know if they'd inherited it from the Bank of England or something, but it wasn't straightforward. It was like a Pythagoras theorem divided by 2. And I went home and decided that I was going to be good at rental. So I practiced my rental calculations at home virtually every day. I'd give myself a target of this is your target rental rate. How do you get there? This is your capital cost. How does that convert? And I loved doing the maths, if you like, and I loved doing the homework, and I got really good at it. And some of the fellas who didn't commit to that used to ask me to work their deals out for them. So in a way, they got rid of the rental manager, but really I was not the rental manager, but I was supporting some of the people who didn't want to do the work. And that's been the case throughout my entire career, that I've supported people who didn't want to do the work.
Right.
And that goes right through to where I am now, to be quite honest with you. One thing I've got to talk about is Bill Kirkwood. So we had a Scottish office manager who lived quite near me. He wasn't a car driver. I used to give him a lift to work sometimes if I was in the office. And it was run, the sales department was run like a regime. Almost like Putin would be in charge of it. All the quotes were hand typed, so you had to do a handwritten letter. Everybody had to do a handwritten letter to introduce the product to the client, etc. If you'd made a spelling mistake on your handwritten letter that someone was going to type on your behalf, red lines were put through your sentences, and that was put back in your in tray. And unlike today, where customers can expect a quote sometimes same day,
yep.
Certainly the day after, you might be 2 or 3 weeks. If you made a spelling mistake, you might be 2 or 3 weeks
really
before your quote went out, and by that time, is
that just because it went in the tray, the spelling mistakes? We're not typing it up for you.
No, just went to put it in your tray, red lines through it. Do again, please do again. And everything had to be on official orders. And when I was on a territory, I got my own territory, as I said, and there's an area near Halifax called Stainland, and there was a customer there, a paper mill. In those days it was called TPT, and the guy there, an engineer by training, he ordered the fork trucks, and I got on with him really well. And the previous guy had put the first truck in, so I'd already got a bit of an opening there. It was about a 20 odd truck user, and I got on with him, and I sold him another one and another and another. And then following another rehash at Barlow's behind the scenes, they got a new director called Peter Byrne, who's tragically not with us anymore, like most of them aren't. And he said, this stock list that we've got is ridiculous. We'll give the sales guys an incentive to get rid of the stock. And there was a bonus of I'll never forget it, £300 to sell a Heist to 3-ton gas truck with manual transmission. So that's called oil clutch.
Yeah.
So you had to gear change. Fortunately, TPT was very hilly. And in the winter, some of the trucks that were all on front-wheel drive suffered from traction issues. Obviously, if you can adjust your revs, etc., and drop your gear down, you can creep up a hill in difficult conditions. And I convinced Philip Brook to take this truck that was on special offer. And there was only one, £300, by the way. I mean, I was on at that time, I'd be on about 180 quid a week. So £300 was
fortnight's wages.
2 weeks' wages.
Yeah.
And anyway, he said, yeah, I'll go for that truck, but I can't give you an order until my directors signed it. Be about a week. And I thought, oh my, if I lose this order, what do I do? And so I went to a phone booth, reversed charges. So Carol, our receptionist, rang me back and she said, who would you like to speak to? Bill Kirkwood, office manager. Put me through to Bill. I said, oh, by the way, Bill, stock number blah, 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 on the stock list. I've just sold to TPT. And he said, give me your order number. And I thought, God, I've not got an order number. So I said 18461. And 18461 was my mum's co-op number that you used to use in the days, so she'd get her credits, and once a year, you know, we'd get half a chicken or something out of it, or some Christmas crackers. And gave him my mum's co-op number 18461. And when the order came in that said like P957, I got summoned into Bill Kirkwood's office to explain.
Can't imagine why.
To explain, and I just explained to Bill that it must have been his requisition number he'd given me by mistake. And anyway, it went through, and they were delighted with the truck, and I was delighted with the 300 quid.
I bet you were.
So it was like 2 weeks' wages in one go. It was, I was over the moon.
I bet you were.
Anyway, once I'd started to get established and I started to get to know my area, and really started to battle against the imports, and was reasonably successful with it. I mean, sometimes you can't beat the money side of it.
Yep.
But I certainly battled, and I mean fought and battled. So anyway, Ellis and Everard Chemicals, they were a part of ICI at the time, and the previous guy, Ken, who'd retired, whose area I inherited, it was in Bradford, said, stick with Ellis and Everard, because one day I'm sure they'll come our way. Well, they used a product called Lancer Boss.
Yep.
At the time, Lancer Boss diesels. And anyway, I got a phone call from Bill Kirkwood to say, or a message from Bill Kirkwood, not a phone call because I've not got a mobile. So I got a message from Bill to say, Ellis and Everard want to speak to you. So I went to see Jim Steele, Ellis and Everard. They got about eight or 10 trucks. And he said, look, I really want you to quote me for a couple of heisters. And I said, right. I said, just out of interest, Jim, I don't want to like shoot you down in flames, but why have you suddenly out of the blue contacted me? Because you've seen me and not seen me so often when I've called. And he said, well, I went through my drawer, and I used to see your business card every 6 or 8 cards. So you're the obvious person. He said, and I don't get on with the new guy that's took over the incumbent brand. So I want you to quote me. So anyway, a long story short on that one, it got a part exchange, and it was a Bonza. And a Bonza was a brand of truck that doesn't exist anymore. It was quite a bit agricultural. Mm-hmm. And our remit at the time was that the company didn't want part exchanges, so you had to find homes for them yourself. And we got an inquiry from a farmer. The farmer was up near Ripon and Catterick, in actual fact, as I remember. And anyway, Bonza is like an agricultural truck, and farmers had heard of Bonza. So I took him to Ellis and Everard before the Heisters got delivered, showed him the Bonza, he went for it, and I sold it to him for what we'd paid for it, which was 1,200 quid as a part exchange. And he said to me, look, you've worked really hard on this, the farmer said, you've worked really hard on this, and I want you to come up to my farm because I'll have got something for you. So
Right.
I said to my wife at the time, don't bother getting any meeting this weekend, because on Friday I'm going up to Catterick meeting this farmer, and he's a turkey farmer. So certainly you can expect a gobbler this weekend.
Yeah.
So even though it was out of season. So anyway, I went up to the farm all the way to Catterick. Went to see the farmer. He'd already paid his 1,200 odd quid plus VAT. And he said, I've got something for you. So I thought, I've left a bit of room in my boot for the turkey. And he gave me a bag of potatoes. Which was worth 50 pence at the time. So that was my experience of farming, if you like.
Travelled all the way to Catterick for a bag of
All
potatoes.
the way to, yeah, for a bag of potatoes. £56 of potatoes. So anyway, the biggest deal that I got during that, in that era, was without doubt Magnet Joinery at Keighley. Magnets were a massive company at that time, massive. And they were as well as opening large factories, they were opening branches all over the country. The first order I got was for 4, and they never ordered a truck after that for a year. So they ran a brand at the time called Coventry Climax, which was a British-built truck made in Coventry, of course. Nothing to do with climaxing. And, well, it's... Anyway, so... moving on from that, they didn't buy anything for a year because they wanted the Heisters to prove a point.
Yep.
And the Heisters did prove a point, and then they decided in those days to move off IC product branches onto electric, and I sold them 110 trucks in total.
Wow.
But it was on the drip, which was great, really, because she had a target.
Yep.
My target was quite high, about 75 new trucks a year at that time, and Magnets would contribute about 20 trucks a year, 25 trucks a year, something like that. So over a 4-year period or so, I'd sold them 110 trucks. Another great deal that I got, off a cold call actually, was a company called Britag, who again were a division of ICI, and they were based at Beverley. They did some agricultural grain products, or something certainly in bags, as I recall, and that was an order for 8 4 ton at 600 load centres, and we had to go to the factory because they had to witness what they called the 5th test. So ICI had their own quality test,
Right.
called the 5th test.
So what did that entail?
It entailed a special tilt test to see at what point the truck would turn over, sideways
Yep.
and forwards, but certainly sideways. So it went on a tilt table, they had to witness that. And they also had a noise test. And the truck at that time, don't forget these were Perkins engines which growled. The Perkins engine, which was a great engine, a 4203 engine it was called. The Perkins engine was a little bit like listening to a Harley Davidson. So it growled a little bit at you. So you did get, there was a noise level where the Japanese ones tended to hum a bit more because they were automotive engines. And their noise level was 85 dBA, and the Heister came in at 86.5, so failed the ICI test. And then we had to go into cushioning the noise level. So all that came out of my margin, and my commission virtually on a daily basis deteriorated until in the end I think I got about 50 quid a truck really from it really. But I was delighted. We had to present in front of an 8-man committee at Welwyn Garden City. So I had to go to Welwyn Garden City and present in front of an 8-man committee why Heister, why Barlow, etc., etc. And to get that order was incredible. It really hard. And all these things challenge you. They challenge your presentation skills. But I think the important thing is that I knew quite a lot about spec. I'm not an engineer. I couldn't repair a fork truck, but I know a lot about the theory of specification, and that really, really helped me a lot, really. So I was pretty good at that. With communication skills, I was quite good at maths, working a deal out. And the whole thing over time, it's not scripted because every customer's different. It's not a script. But you get used to certain questions, and you get used to looking at reactions and
almost into a rhythm.
Yeah, into a rhythm almost. It's not a script because, like I said, every customer's different. You look for body language. I didn't get on with every customer. Not every customer thought I was the best thing ever. But I used to make customers laugh. And I've never heard a customer ever say to me with a scowl on his face, "There's the order, you bastard, get out of my office." So there's always been a laugh somewhere. And I've got a decent sense of humour. I'm fairly quick thinking, and I think the whole package put together has steered me in the direction that I've ended up in ultimately.
Yeah.
So after 11 years service at Barlow, I left. I was actually headhunted, not by the Zulus on this occasion, but by another forklift truck company. I took a call from home one night out of the blue, not looked for a job, not even got a CV, to be honest. And they asked me, or the person asked me on the phone, would I be interested in talking to them about joining this particular unknown company? And I said no, I was really happy, and please don't ring me again. 2 weeks later, the same person rang and said, before you put the phone down, it would be in your interest to come and talk to us. So I thought, well, perhaps you never know what he's really talking about, because he didn't say a lot at that time. So I actually made an appointment to come and see this gentleman. His name was Mike Butters, and he was the special projects manager for a growing Nissan dealership called United Fork Trucks at their head office in Mirfield, or operating from their head office in Mirfield. United Fork Trucks were a bit of a thorn in my side to a degree on the territory, simply because of pricing structure. They got a decent truck, not as good as a Heister in my view, but it was aesthetically, that's a great word, pleasing on the eye.
Right.
It was a very nice looking truck on the eye. The colours were good. It got lights, a few extras that we'd not got. I once actually came second on a demonstration with Heister because our demo truck had not got a wheel spinner. So it got as ridiculous as that, really, and that's the gospel truth. So I went along for a meeting just with Mike Butters. Mike was ex-national sales manager for Oldham Batteries and a personal friend of the United MD. So we got chatting, and he described an opportunity for me that perhaps wasn't there in the offering at Barlow. This was a sales management role. I was really interested in getting into management. I'd learnt a lot, and was happy to pass some of that knowledge on, including being in the front line myself. So we got chatting, and what he described to me appealed to me. one of the things about United, they'd rapidly expanded, and what they'd done is promoted from within, and they'd actually promoted good salespeople to run depots and be managers or branch managers and then sales managers. And to be quite honest with you, a lot of them were just not quite up to it. They were a bit Jack the Laddish. They flew by the seat of the pants sometimes, and the theory was from Mike was, you've got a great reputation, Richard, you're a professional, we want to clean up our business and we want to bring in people who come from a professional background in our industry, and we want you to start leading the other people in the direction that the company wants us to go in. So yeah, all that sounds great. What's the money then?
That's what it all boils down to, isn't it?
Yeah, well, often.
Yeah.
And at that time I was earning about just short of 30 grand, but on a 12.5 grand basic at Barlow.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, name your price and we'll let you know. So I said 30 grand basic and a car of my choice, and they said done. Yeah, okay then.
As easy as that.
It was as easy as that, Matt, to be quite honest with you. And 30, yeah, well, I was earning that sort of money, but you always think when you're on salary and commission, we'll have as good a year as last year. What about the year before? This customer's gone, or I've got to open that door, etc. And the cushion of that sort of basic salary was too good to miss.
Mm-hmm.
So I agreed to take the job, handed me notice in at Barlow. Once you hand your notice in at Barlow, you're more or less treated as a leper, really, to be honest. So once they go through we'll give you an opportunity to be sales manager of tenant sweepers, no thanks very much. I sort of left. You leave on the spot, really. It was very traumatic for me. I've made some great friends there. We were a great team together. It was a great company. The opportunity was just too good to miss, and it wasn't just about the typical excuse. I've discussed it with my wife, and
Yep.
and I'm doing it for my family. I was actually always doing it for me, and my family followed the success that I had, and they benefited from whatever I did, or the opposite. So I left Barlow, heartbroken. I was absolutely in pieces. Hugged people, it was awful, really. So I joined United on the Monday, left on the Friday, I think, or the Thursday. A month's money, so that was great news. I think it was tax-free in those days as well.
Even better.
Yeah, and then I started at United. They ordered me a brand new car. So outrageous a car they ordered, which was, excuse me, a Nissan Sunny ZX Coupe, which was like something from Starsky and Hutch, same sort of colours.
Yeah.
I was terrified of driving it. You've only got to touch your foot on the accelerator and it was doing 60. I was terrified of it, really. But anyway, that's by the by. So I got involved with United. Yeah, they were Jack the Lads, a lot of them. They did crazy deals, really. Deals that didn't make sense to me. A 2-truck deal would have a new side shift on, because it was a factory order, for example, and the second truck would have a second-hand side shift just to save 200 quid, and so the salesman earned 15 quid more. It was absolutely crazy, some of it. So I spent quite a bit of time cleaning up the mess that there was, and it was a mess.
Mm-hmm.
There was deals that they did which you thought, how did that deal make sense? You know, selling to a company and giving them a parts discount because the guy asked for a parts discount, going forward, to find out that the discount that we offered him was 5% better than the discount we got. It was really, really, honestly, strange.
Makes no sense.
But I met some great people as well, and in the 3 years that I was there, I bonded with quite a number of people. United were the group that owned them. APG Group was mismanaged from what I can gather. It was quite a strange setup. The chairman and managing director was London-based, office in the city. As it turned out, one of his deals was he rented to the company his own paintings for his own boardroom. So he got 20 grand a year for that.
Wow.
So
Wow.
his own paintings, he actually physically rented them to the company. And all this cropped up when United tragically went into receivership. I'd never really been in that position before. I didn't even know it was happening at the time. Things were really tight. They'd made a lot of directors had been made redundant. A lot of the Jack the Lad sort of employees, and not everyone was in that category, but lots of people were, especially on sales, in particular on sales. The admin side, accounts and that sort of department was great. So they brought a guy in, who I won't name, but he was quite brutal in asset stripping, just to really get some cash in the bank, really. Some of the deals he did didn't make sense to me either. But anyway, the experience was such that the company was placed into receivership, as the group was. The whole business cascades down, and the whole thing went under. So I was really out of work, really, for the first time, and obviously my wife was concerned. I was concerned. It's the first time I brought her into it, really, but I had 2 kids at the time. I've still got 2 kids, by the way, and it was a difficult period to think through. So the receivers came in and they were selling assets as quick as they could, underselling them to the trade, etc. And I managed to convince the receiver to let me keep the company car, and I'd work for the receivers on commission only.
Right.
On the basis that I got 10% of the total sale, providing I exceeded their expectations on values. And in about a 4-week period, I earned about 8 grand, which was quite remarkable, really. And then after that, I really was unemployed. The phone rang from various different companies, really. I had about 7 different calls in about a 2-week period. One of them, ironically, was from the Mitsubishi dealer who was based in Halifax. He was one of the people who got more discount on parts than United were receiving. And I'd reversed that, and as a result of that and other things, we didn't really see eye to eye. And he was one of the people who actually rang me to come and join him as a co-director. So I actually said to him, let's say they called him Frank, and I said on the phone, Frank, we don't even like each other. Why would we even work together, Frank? And he said, yeah, you're right, really. I wish I'd not rung you now. So the top and bottom of it is that I was looking for a job, and Forkway, a southern company based in Buckinghamshire, had actually applied and got the dealership for Nissan in Yorkshire, and they got an office in Sheffield, 2 engineers and 2 managers, which is a bit odd in terms of ratios, but anyway, that was their choice. And I approached the managing director at the time, who welcomed a discussion the following week, really. We had about 3 hours together, got on really well. He was quite a charismatic individual in certain ways. He came out with some sayings that I've lived with even since and used them, so everybody learned something off everybody. and I got the opportunity then of presenting my business plan to the board at Fortway. Fortway was a privately owned company by a family who were all shareholders, three of them, 3 or 4 even, but not involved in running the company, just took the dividends and perhaps some of the benefits that existed at that time. So I did a business plan and then did an interview with the board, which lasted, as far as I can remember, for about 6 hours. So it was about a 6-hour interview. When we got to the final bit, which was how much do you want, what I did say is, yes, I've been out of work for a fortnight. Please, whatever you do, don't think that that's to be taken advantage of. And I want at least what I'm earning now, which was 30 grand a year, or was earning. And they agreed to that. And that's really when we had lift-off at Fortway. So the first month, I realised that the two managers weren't right for us, the service manager and the sales manager. So I got rid of both of them one Monday morning. I'd been with the company about a month, and then started to bring my own people in. And my own people represented some of the people who were at United,
Yep.
who were in the same boat as I had been, out of work. Some of them were very, very skilled people. And I brought certain individuals in really, really quickly. On top of that, Fortway had negotiated with a finance company the opportunity of handling their portfolio for them, including disposals, and that really gave us the platform to grow really quickly. So we grew at a rate of knots that was quite amazing, really. So we'd sort of recruit a new person virtually every week. We'd get 15-20 customers on board. Don't forget there was a big void, especially for Nissan customers. They'd no service support, or the people that had substituted in for United really didn't understand the product. Our people did. We were Nissan dealers at the time anyway at Fortway, and we started growing really, really rapidly. We went from 2, 4, 6, 8. Before you knew it, we had 20 employees, 25 employees. We looked for assets that had gone missing. I really enjoyed that. Detective work I just loved the detective work, going through the paperwork, hygiene that United had, which at head office actually was fairly well documented. Even though some of it was missing, it was fairly easy to find assets and recover them. And Fortway got paid for that recovery and had the opportunity of reselling and liquidating certain machines, which gave us a platform and a cash flow to move forward.
Right, Richard, could you tell me how you became a shareholder at Fortway?
Yes, it was in the early 90s when the Morley business, because we'd moved there, we'd outgrown Sheffield so quickly. We took some premises on 7-year lease, right in the corridor of West and South Yorkshire at Morley. And the managing director who I did get on with started to sort of deteriorate, really. It seemed to be the success. Sometimes people can't cope with other people's successes, even though they might benefit from it. I've come across that throughout my career, to be quite honest with you. And he started questioning things that were just so low down in the areas that you would question. When we were doing business left, right and centre, we were writing contract hire business, casual hire, we were recovering damage. We supported clients who'd got serious maintenance issues, companies that had never dealt with us before. We took lots of new business on, and we're writing as I say, contract business and outright sale business, to the point where things got questioned out of, I think, boredom. So the straw that broke the camel's back was when he rang me one morning and asked me if I could explain why we'd ordered plastic coated paper clips when galvanised paper clips were like £1 a million cheaper. And unfortunately, I really do struggle with fools, and this was like a bridge too far for me. So I hung up on him, and the other two directors who were based at head office down in the south of England, I discussed with them how disillusioned I'd become with this sort of management style. Wasn't something that I expected. It was almost as though certain individuals couldn't cope with the success, really, and I don't know why people are like that, but they are. So a coup existed in the January of the, I think it was 93, something like that, 92, 93, and a coup existed, and the owners of the company, the shareholders, came to see me. I put my cards on the table, and amazingly, 7 days later, he'd gone. And then Martin Fletcher, who was one of the non-shareholding directors, became managing director of the company. And then shortly after that, I was invited to join the board of directors at Fortway. So I was moved from general manager to sales director for the company. At that time, we got two businesses, one in Amersham, one in in Morley, and the company was going from strength to strength. A lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it, profit-wise, was on the back of the receivership of United and the opportunities that gave us. A lot of the credit must go for that. But the tenacity of the people I worked with and the team spirit was just amazing. It was a real team spirit. We were all very similar age. I was probably slightly older, but I've always felt a lot younger than my birth certificate says. And team spirit was just amazing. And we built that progress on the back of that team spirit. To the point where the accounts came out and the owners thought, this is too good to miss. It's a great opportunity to sell. We're getting older. They were in the 70s or whatever they were. At least two of them were anyway. Let's sell. So they asked us if we'd like to put a management buyout together. And that's what we did. So Martin Fletcher had a big part in that management buyout opportunity. He made the connections with accountants like Grant Thornton, who got an MBO, as it's known in the trade, team who did this sort of thing and married you with an investor. And we were married with a company who were quoted, I think they're certainly in the FTSE 250, a company called 3 Eyes. And 3 Eyes were prepared to invest in Fortway. However, an offer was made to the shareholders, and straight away after, 2 weeks later, a counter offer came in from a company who were nothing to do with forklift trucks at all, who were based in Barnsley, and linked to a scrap dealership. The scrap dealer individual that owned it, the scrap dealership, was also one of the two people who bought the Hadfield site at Sheffield. Yep. And developed it into Meadow Hall. So they bought the Hatfield Steelworks, a guy called Paul Sykes, and the fella that founded Hygiena, Eddie Healy. and between them they'd bought the site, flattened it, got planning permission, got the footings in, and then sold it for 1 billion. But for some reason, Paul Sykes, as I recall, had got some friendship with a company called Lex, and Lex used to be called Harvey Plant. It was then called Lex Harvey, and all of a sudden they'd put a bid in for Fortway at about 500,000 or 400,000 more than we had, and the owners didn't appreciate anything that had been achieved from a company that when I joined had got 27 staff and had now got 50 odd staff and a really bubbling balance sheet, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, or were going to. Lex had a private meeting with me. I won't go into all the detail because I don't want any repercussions from anybody. But some of the ideas that they got, in particular about the South, I thought were underhand, and I actually said to them at Woodall Services, where we had a 2.5 hour meeting, that I would rather boil my own head than work for them and their mercenary approach. And a week later they pulled out the deal. Right. So the management buyout was back on. I'd realised that it wasn't going to happen, or I thought it wasn't going to happen, so I'd actually been approached by somebody called Sir Neville Bowman Shaw, who was the ex-chairman of Lancerboss and the founder. He got a reputation as a hirer and firer, and he offered me a job over at a business over in Lancashire as the deputy managing director of this company. The salary he offered me was quite amazing. I told him it wasn't enough, and he upped it by 20 grand. And it was amazing. The deal on the table in writing was stunning. However, it did mean a lot of time away from home. Me and my wife had separated at that time. My son lived with me. He was 12, my daughter was 9. Lived with a mother, and it meant that I couldn't give my son the attention that he deserved and he needed. So although my ego said, come on, you'd love this job, the reality was I turned it down. And I turned it down just at the point when the management buyout was back on. We went to Three Eyes, 3 of us, Martin, myself and a guy called John Leach, who was our financial director, a really, really nice gentleman. I never heard him swear, to be quite honest with you, in any meeting, although we went to see Chubby Brown once in advance of a board meeting in the days when we used to treat ourselves to one overnight stay a year, and he laughed at every single joke that Chubby came out with, more than anybody else did in the audience, which was quite amazing. So the management buyout happened, and Martin, myself and John Leach put our money on the line. In my case, I don't know about Martin, but I had to borrow mine, which is quite daunting really, because you want to make it work, especially when you've just split up and you've just divvied your house up and you've kept the house. You don't want to lose all you've got, and it all really escalated from there really. Within a couple of years, Fortway bought Solent Fort Trucks. Good or bad, it was an awkward. It was a good company with a lot of bad luck. They had a lot of bad luck. For example, their biggest client closed their factory down, 45 trucks gone. Another client moved over to the Channel Islands, 35 trucks gone. It was another company moved out of the area altogether who were in soft drinks. That was about 25 trucks a year, or 25 truck user, that had gone. And before we knew it, whatever we bought down there had divided by two and then by two again. Two of the employees had started their own fork truck company in competition to us, and it was a very difficult time, especially when you live in Yorkshire, travelling down to Southampton, dealing with people who were demotivated, losing orders, losing customers. It was a really awkward period for us at that time. However, Yorkshire was continued to flourish. We'd got on with the support of the great people who work at Fortway in the north of England. We managed to sustain a really, really good growth, etc. In Amersham, we tried a few things to install enthusiasm into some new salespeople. We recruited quite a number of people. Most of them didn't work, the odd one did, and then all of a sudden we met a guy called Dave Portway. Dave Portway was very chirpy. He'd worked at Barlow, he knew the Heister product, even though we were selling Nissan at that time. And I got on with David really well. David was a person who he seemed to know people. He was a good networker, and we started growing in the south as well, instead of just sustaining itself. Really, are we all right for time or?
Yeah.
So that's really how Fortway, as far as Richard Greaves is concerned, I was a shareholder and a director of the company. I think what I've got to say is that the people within Fortway are very, very special for me, because they believed in a dream. You know, we had a dream in the early days. 7 of us did, then 14 of us, then 21 of us. And we believed in a dream, and we carried that dream through. And what we did, we got the customers who wanted to share the same dream. And what that dream is about products. It's about good products, but it's also about great service. And I don't just mean getting an engineer out within 2 hours, but what I mean is doing things that are different. So when a customer who worked weekends and needed a machine that had broken down through no fault of our own, we don't believe, we ordered a part and then sent one of the engineers on his motorbike to Birmingham on Saturday lunchtime to pick the part up, and it was fitted Saturday afternoon. And it's those sort of gestures and that sort of tenacity that has won us and kept us in the good light that we're in, to be quite honest with you. Southampton had deteriorated to a point where, through, like I said, bad luck in the main, it was mainly all bad luck really, that what we bought was etched away by circumstance and by individuals. And it's always been a frustration for me that we could never really get Southampton back to where it was, although it has started to breathe oxygen again since a guy called Ray Berry's been down there. We've got a nice small team, a nucleus of it's a small team down there, but it's actually starting to grow very, very gradually. Amersham's started to get known and get involved in deals that we didn't normally get involved in, which is great. I think the other thing is as well that the appointment of at that time, I'm just going back now on myself a bit, I'm just probably gone a bit too quick. The recession of 2008 was always going to catch everybody out. And at that time we got a guy on board called Gary Hawkhead. What's Gary Hawkhead? Oh my God, it's just amazing. If anybody ever wanted to demonstrate a work ethic that guarantees business, that person's got that. His work ethic's just phenomenal. And he's never say die attitude. He doesn't like losing orders. He'll go through hoops of fire to get business. And we needed that at that time because we'd got other people, perhaps not with us now, but we'd certainly got other people who at that time were shrinking violets to a degree. And it was a very difficult time, but we managed to pull through it. And then, I think 12 years ago, so we're going back to 2008-ish, 2009 or 10, Nissan made the decision that Fort Way were no longer going to be dealers. What had happened behind the scenes is that one of our competitors had lost their dealership, who were operating or marketing Toyota. When Toyota started going direct with their own sales force, they were looking for a dealership, and they bought out one of the Nissan dealers over in the east, or not the east coast, but the east of England. And they bought that Nissan dealer and demanded the postcodes which affected the dealer over in Hull and also Fort Way. And they got the whole opportunity at like almost like it was just signing a piece of paper that guaranteed that they'd sell 1,000 trucks a year. 2008 kicked in, and I think they sold about 300. We were then cast out in the wilderness to a degree. There was obviously a degree of uncertainty, but the staff stayed with us, all except for a couple of salespeople who were headhunted, almost seduced by the company that had bought the dealer over in the east of England, and they decided to follow the yellow brick road, almost like the Pied Piper, but this time it was pound notes that attracted them
Instead of rats.
Yeah. Although rats did come later, to be quite honest, but that's a separate story. So what did we do? I went out and saw all our major customers and terminated all their contracts and signed them up again on a new scheme, on a new deal, which gave them a saving at a time when they needed a saving, and gave us turnover and profit at a time when we needed turnover and profit. And it also gave us, it meant that those customers were out of reach of the dissidents that had left us, who sold their soul. Well, that's how I've always felt about it.
It's all about honesty, Richard.
They sold their soul. It was almost like Judas Iscariot. So, let's combat it, and let us, every time we're up against them, if we ever are, we've got to really, really dig in deep.
Mm-hmm.
Dig in. And I'm happy to dig in. So I held a sales meeting just after, and I turned up in combat outfit. I looked a little bit like Norman Schwarzkopf, but I did point out to our staff that we're at war, and we have to see it like that.
Yep.
Someone's trying to get our company for nothing. Not for a price, but for free. And that really, really hurt me. So that was the battle that we started fighting. Gary Hawkhead was part of that battle at that time. So were others, and we managed to pull through. In particular, what really changed it for me was when 6 or 7 companies approached us to take on their product, and Yale was one of them. Yale was basically Heister, but in a different colour and a different logo. So instead of being custard, it's mustard. And we had the opportunity of going to the Craigavon factory in Northern Ireland, which built Heister and Yale side by side, and it was a complete no-brainer to take on the opportunity of selling Yale.
For yourself, it was kind of going full circle from
Yeah,
where you first started.
It was, and I think the thing is, because I'm a spec salesperson, so I'm a features and benefits and an opportunities person, that really, really suited me, and it suited my personality, and it suited my training and my mindset. The fork truck industry is littered with individuals who get an inquiry and want to do a deal at 78 quid a week fully maintained. But it's not about that. It's actually about identifying, find the client or let the client find you, identify the opportunity and turn your features into the desire of that customer. Unless you've got a customer that really, really desires what you are selling, you're always going to struggle with it. Of course, there are customers who penny pinch, and that's what it is to a degree. Customer saves £5 a week on a rental deal. So in a year, he saves 150 quid. Sorry, 250, and on a contract he saves £1,250 in 5 years, and it measures that, £5 a week saving. But the same person doesn't know how much they spend on fuel, which I find quite stunning, or doesn't question someone who leans on a sweeping brush for 20 hours out of 40 and makes tea and reads magazines. Never put a value behind that, but for some reason puts a value behind £5 a week.
Yeah.
And that's always been a struggle for me. Yes, of course, we've got to be competitive, but if everybody wanted the cheapest, Mercedes, Audi and BMW wouldn't have, and VW wouldn't have a 30% market share in the UK. It'd all be going to Hyundai or whoever. I just don't get it at all. No one thinks anything if Sky put their bill up by £5 a month, but if you're £2.50 dearer, it's an issue. And what we've got to do as salespeople is talk about the features of our machine, and Yale has got so many, it's just incredible, and show and demonstrate those features and what the benefit the client's going to get from that. We've got features that save tyre wear, that save fuel, and even at Forkway, do our salespeople really go down that route? No. We still are in that sort of mindset of we're 3 quid a week dearer. It's what I call SFW. And, if we can't sell £3 a week away, we really shouldn't be doing this job.
Yeah.
That's the point that I'm making, really. And one day, salespeople are going to get someone to talk to them about how to sell benefits and how to turn their features into desirability. We've got to get the client to want what you've got to sell. You know, we've got to get that urge where the client wants what we've got. Of course, you have to relationship build. Relationship building's great. As I said, you know, ages ago in this interview, that no one's ever given me an order and said, "Get out of my office." We've always had some sort of laugh, or even if it's been a tough negotiation, you know, it's been a tough negotiation, we've always had a little bit of a laugh and a joke, because that is part of relationship building.
It is. So, out of every deal and everything that you've done in your career, which would you say is the most standout, your most favourite one that you've done?
Well, there's quite a few. I would probably say Premdor for me was a bit of a standout one.
Mm-hmm.
We'd had the account from 4 trucks, you know, 4 trucks, that's all they had. And they've now got 70 odd trucks from Fort Way. But instead of renegotiating a contract, we were actually put in front of a committee.
Right.
And the committee on it was about 6 or 8 people, and about 5 of them I didn't even know they were. They were shipped in from either other departments who were nothing to do with buying a fork truck or renting, to other companies within the group, and we entered a tender process for the first time with that client. The tender process was quite substantial. You know, accounts, all health and safety issues, show us this certificate, show us that, what's your record in this area, etc. And then the commercial offering. What did make me smile, and you only get to know these things after the event, some of our competitors, big international companies who advertise in every magazine that you could ever pick up about materials handling products, had put teams of people in to do a site survey, and at least 2 of them got it completely wrong.
Really?
Which I just thought was just so, honestly, it just makes me smile. So we had the opportunity of, well, not the opportunity, that's not right. Paul Fox had joined us then, so one of the dissidents came back into the fold, because a lot of them eventually want to come back to Daddy. And Paul Fox was no exception.
Yep.
What was Paul Fox to me? A great salesman. Great salesman. Not the same salesman as Gary Hawkhead. It didn't mean, though, that he couldn't win races.
Yep.
Because he can, and he did, and he does. Different salesperson, that's all. And Paul Fox had rejoined us, and he'd rejoined us as sales director. So that was a little bit of it was a new role for me, because I'd had that role, and for someone to take that responsibility takes over some of the ethos of what you want to do or wanted to do, gets took away from you, because he got his own ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And while we are very like-minded in so many different ways, I was even with him and spotted the woman that he's now married to, and said, "That's the one for you." And 20 years later, or 19 years later, they are happily married. Oh, that's what he keeps telling me. I've not spoke to her for quite a while. So Paul had the idea of they'd never seen Yale before at Premdor. They'd only had Nissan, and Paul had the idea of putting 10 brand new trucks across the entire fleet with a year to run on contract. That was a big gamble for us. That was £250,000 investment to get them to love and desire and want the Yale product, see the benefits and feel the product under the backside, and that's exactly what happened. So, but we still went through the tender stage. We never for a minute thought it was nailed on. we thought we'd got a great chance, but it was never nailed on. And then we got down to the last two. And that's when the account manager at that time was Dean Firth, who's with us now. Not in the room, of course, because he's out on the road somewhere, or he better be. And Dean was the second dissident that came back, who wanted to come back to father. And Dean was the account manager at the time, and we did a presentation. So Dean, a guy from a telematics company, because at that time we didn't do our own telematics, from a telematics company came, they did a presentation to do with health and safety and the features that their system would offer the client, etc. And Dean did his presentation on our proposal. And I looked round, because I've always been interested in body language and people's eyes, the facial expression, just the general demeanour. And I felt nervous.
Right.
There was a lot of straight faces. There was a couple who knew us who were smiling a bit and nodding, but generally I was quite nervous. My contribution to the meeting was quite minimal because I wasn't presenting, and I was offered the opportunity, or we were offered the opportunity of anything else to say, and I said yes I have actually. And I said that we've been partners, which we had for more than 20 years. We'd grown together. We went through 2008 together. Premdo were a company where we'd managed to save them £100,000 in rental by tying up the Nissan fleet as it was at that time. They'd benefited from that. We'd also supported them in things like misuse and abuse, or we can't call it that really, damage, I'd call it, damage to trucks and the cost of repairs, etc. And we'd supported all this, and they knew that. And what I said to them basically was, we've been together for 20 odd years. We're good together, you know, we mean something to one another, we know one another, we've supported one another. But change is so tempting. It is so tempting to think, let's change for change's sake. This actually at the time was a 7-year deal. If they'd have made the wrong choice or not in our favour, we would have had to wait 7 years to have another go at it. So what I pointed out was that change is so easy to think, let's change for change's sake. So what I would suggest to anybody who's got married or who's got a partner, go home tonight, when you're having your evening meal, sit down with your partner and say, give an example. You've been a great wife. We've been together 20 years. Had some great holidays together. Had 2 lovely kids. You know, we've looked after our parents together through ill health, etc., etc. But I fancy a change. Just fancy a change, really. So you're out, and I'm just going to find a change. So with that in mind, let me know how you get on. And I got up and walked out. I actually got up and walked out, and everybody looked at each other.
Say, what's going on here?
What is happening? And 3 weeks later, I got a call from Chris, who was our principal contact at Premdo, who was a smashing guy, really great. What a great sense of humour he's got. Wicked, as modern day talk is now, wicked. And he said, I'm delighted to tell you you've got the deal. And I did say to Chris, you know, what really changed it for you, because it was looking awkward. And he said, to be honest with you, it's what you said at the end of it all. He said, because we all looked at each other when you'd gone and said, well, he's right.
Yeah.
Why would we change? We know who they are, they know us, they've helped us, we've helped them. We've been great partners together, and it's been a partnership. What's the point of changing? We don't know what's round the corner with somebody else. So the product looks good. This Yale product's as good as they said, if not better. let's go with it. So I think that, from a satisfaction point
Yeah.
of view, was really good. The Shoreham Port Authority deal we got in 2020 was amazingly good.
Yeah.
I think what really excited me about it was that particular deal is all the trucks were the same, identical 5.5 ton diesels with quite a decent spec, all cabbed up, etc., etc. And they reordered through Fortway against against the other competitor who got down to the last two with us, who were Korean, not North Korea, I might add to the camera. I said, I'm not over sure they have 4 trucks there. They just have people. But we were more than £125,000 dearer over the term of the agreement, which pales into insignificance, these customers who sometimes think they've done so well to save £3 a week. And we got that business. That was a great order. And the relationship we've got with the site's really, really strong. John Cotton's at Murfield, an enormous family business in bedding textiles. That's the easiest way to describe it. Been a client for 30 years, been a great customer. They've got something, I think, like about 60 trucks from us now. It's quite amazing, their loyalty. Obviously, they demand service, and we deliver that service, and that's all part. That and the product is all part of what makes that deal work. In between the Hawkhead going, because Gary's moved on, he's a director elsewhere now, and Paul Fox rejoining, we also recruited a national sales manager called Paul Sercombe. Paul Sercombe was known to me as the industry leader in telematics. Without doubt, no one seemed to know more about telematics than Paul Sercombe. He was in that business for a long, long time. The opportunity came up to take Paul into Fortway to sell our products and also our own telematics system. Paul, I nearly said Fortway then, Paul is the ultimate professional. His presentation skills are just incredibly good. He's a really, really personable person. Absolutely ideal for major accounts. And Paul has developed many, many customers that we've had and have now got. In particular, McFarlane Packaging, who are a national manufacturer and distributor of packaging materials. They are without doubt in the top 5 leading clients of Fortway. They not only run predominantly warehouse product, but also the combi lift or the Armmaster product, which again falls into that warehouse category. They have way over 100 trucks from Fortway. The relationships grown and grown and grown on the back of Paul Sercombe, and obviously the service and the support that our respective departments give them. It's difficult to name all the customers, but there's so many that have been so loyal, and there's so many that have decided to jump on board with us. For me, I can't understand how we ever lose an order. I'm baffled at times, and by some of the... I think one of the main things where you can lose existing customers, and we don't lose many, is usually when a new face comes in. So once that relationship's been broken and the new face comes in, the new face always wants to alter something that the old face used to do. which is a bit disappointing, really. What's quite amazing is that you take things like football, and people say, well, what a great job Alex Ferguson did, and as soon as they deviate from what Alex Ferguson did, all the press say he should have done what Alex Ferguson did, and that's why because he didn't, that's why he's been sacked. But for some reason, customers very rarely follow on from the previous incumbent, and that's when sometimes it can be awkward, because they want to change to show that the other person wasn't as good as they are, or that they're cleverer, and that can be a bit distressing in sales. Moving off sales just for a minute, nobody can run a forklift truck company without a service department.
Correct.
And we've got a great service department, but we've got very loyal staff. We've got people who are very, very clever at what they do. Customers appreciate it. One of the greatest recruits I ever made for Fortway was someone who was 17 when she started with us, and that's Joanne Heptonstall. So Joanne was 17, not over sure that she knew what she wanted to do. Is forklift trucks a sexy sort of industry? Probably not. But she came and was recruited by us. She's I can't, obviously not allowed to say how old she is, but she's certainly doubled her age and a bit more, and she's, for me, probably the most outstanding person I've ever recruited, along with some of the people I've said earlier, the Foxes, the Hawkheads, Paul Freeman, many others, but Tim Hunter, crikey, why did I forget Tim? That's probably because he doesn't work for us anymore. Tim retired 2 years ago, was one of the original people that started with Fortway when it was in Sheffield, when we needed the support of good engineers. Tim was an outstanding engineer and still is, and Tim was recruited as our service manager. He became service director inside about 5 years. We needed that sort of input into board meetings, and he gave us that input. Service and sales don't always gel, because they've got different mindsets sometimes, and different profit centres even. But I got on with Tim really well, and as a result, other people came on board. Paul Gudgeon was retired again, outstanding service manager for Fortway. We've got lots of people who followed on. Ian Chapman, technical manager, probably the cleverest engineer I've ever met. He could almost design a forklift truck, let alone repair one. So I've been very lucky that I've surrounded myself with really good people, and we've kept a close-knit community, and as a result of that, we've been as successful as we have been. And that makes us obviously a prime target out in the marketplace to be beaten. People like to beat us, because little old Fortway might only employ 66 or 65 or 67 people, but we can beat anybody, and we have beaten anybody and everybody, and they must sit back and think, how did they do that? And we've done it on the back of great product. Don't underestimate the product. Great service, and a can-do mindset. I know people talk about that, but you know, a can-do mindset's what it's about. So for me, it's a team. It's teamwork, And, as I've said so often, it's teamwork that makes the dream work.